The targeted murdering of lawyers has been an increasingly great concern over the last few years in South Africa. In 2018, renowned Cape Town lawyer advocate Pete Mahalik was brutally murdered while dropping off his children at school. His killers were convicted and sentenced last year. In 2019, advocate Vernon Yankees was assassinated in a hail of bullets in Mitchell's Plain as he walked out of a shop. Just last year, two more lawyers, Ayanda Gladile and Mbeko Venfolo, died in Cape Town at the hands of targeted killings. This week, another attempted assassination of a high-profile lawyer, advocate Coreth Naude, has sent chilling shock through the spines of South Africans. Are lawyers under siege in an environment of unrelenting gangsterism, gratuitous crime and corruption? Nicole Fritz of Defend Our Democracy, as well as Pearl Mfusi, Legal Practice Council Director in KwaZulu-Natal, joins us for this conversation. Pearl, I'd like to start this conversation with you. It seems that there is a very specific targeting of high-profile lawyers pertaining to high-profile cases. Is there anything done proactively in conjunction with the Legal Practice Council and law enforcement authorities to give protection to politically exposed attorneys and lawyers in the country?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Firstly, I'd like to state that the Legal Practice Council condemns in the strongest terms the attempted assassination on advocate Naude. This is disappointing, particularly because we're in a country that's just 11 days away from observing Women's Month. It is a crisis which we see unfolding, but it is very much a state of affairs that requires a greater level of collaboration between the Legal Practice Council and law enforcement. So we've observed over time that these incidents are increasing, and we will at this stage start the process of engaging the relevant stakeholders and having a discussion on how better these matters can be handled in future.
Yeah. What, Nicole, is the net impact this could have on our democracy, very specifically given that there is an ongoing intimidation of lawyers who do work for state functionaries in highly litigated matters that are politically exposed? One could imagine that could cripple accountability in democracies.
Absolutely, and I think that is the motive and the rationale for these types of attacks, that those are on the front lines of the fight against crime, organized and syndicated crime in this country. Not just lawyers, but investigators, professional investigators like investigating officers Charles Kinnear are being specifically targeted. They're being eliminated, and if not eliminated, subject to these types of threats, which act to intimidate and ensure that there is a deterrent for professionals taking on these types of crime. And there's no way that we as a country can hold out a prospect of winning over and securing a victory against organized crime and ensuring kind of a peaceful, stable democracy if we have those who are best resourced, most expert in tackling this type of crime being either eliminated or intimidated from taking on the task of confronting those who are the kingpin and linchpins of organized crime in this country.
Yeah. I want to maybe put this question to you, and Pearl, because I think this is something that is uncomfortable to discuss, but necessary to discuss, perhaps albeit premature. The case that Coreth Naude was working on pertains to a politically exposed business lady in South Africa, and that is Sean Mkize and her related companies. This is who SARS is pursuing for tax-related matters. This is not the first assassination attempt in this particular matter. Last year, Thomas and Murray Kluter were also shot and killed in March 2023 on the exact same case. In fact, Kluter Murray was very specifically appointed by the court as a curator of assets belonging to the companies of Mkize. Is there anything, however premature and prima facie it may be, to be read into this and to be given very important due consideration in how resources are assigned to this particular matter?
Well, you're quite correct in stating that it's premature for us to be able to comment on the matter. It's still under investigation. But I would believe that the law enforcement agencies would be well versed to be able to respond to your question, but also they would be better placed in the course of the investigations to see whether the matters are indeed related.
Yeah. Do you have a view on that, Nicole?
I do think that obviously it is premature when one can't say who is behind this assassination attempt. But we have seen far too many assassinations and attempted assassinations of those who are on the front lines of the fight against crime, whether like Advocate Naude, various liquidators, whistleblowers, investigators, as I said, like investigating officer Charles Kinnear. I think the state has to act immediately to upgrade the protection of those who are involved in this fight. It cannot be that those who are approached, and we know that in order to win this fight, those involved in criminal justice, the criminal justice system, can't be dissuaded from taking up the brief for fear that they will lose their lives in doing so. And so they must have the reassurance that they have the full protection of the state when they are undertaking their professional duties. And that is something that we need to see the state act on urgently to ensure that those on the front lines are given the utmost protection.
Paul, in the last administration of government, there was a discussion around the protection of whistleblowers with the introduction of the Whistleblowers Protection Bill, which is yet to be passed through. This came at strong recommendation from the Zondo Commission of Inquiry around the protection of whistleblowers and associated persons. Associated person in this instance are attorneys working on cases, lawyers working on investigations, as well as on litigation pertaining to these sorts of cases. Are there legislative tools that can be used to protect, defend, and to dissuade any sort of attacks against persons of interest when it comes to these sorts of cases?
Well, I think the legislation right now is adequate. We just need to ensure that we utilize the relevant prescripts correctly and highlight more the values that this constitution inscribes. We need to ensure that correct emphasis is placed on legal practitioners' ability to actually source their clients at their own will, and they should be able to practice without fear and favor. So I do think that there are sufficient legislative provisions that actually cater for this.
Can I pause you, Paul? What do you mean there by enabling and empowering litigators to be able to choose their clients at their discretion? Do they not have that discretion?
Well, they do, but acts of violence and intimidation of this nature, as the colleague that you interviewed earlier said, have the impact of actually intimidating people. So as much as there is nothing stopping a legal practitioner from representing an entity or an individual, but such acts of violence and intimidation would obviously result in people not being willing to represent certain entities and persons. So not only is this does this have a direct impact on the ability to practice the legal practitioners, but it also undermines the very constitutional values and principles that every South African ascribes to. So it is not a situation that should be tolerated any further. And I believe that the provisions with regards to the whistleblowers will certainly go a long way in ensuring that we are able to see some change with regards to the situation.
Nicole, do we have sufficient legislative safeguards against the intimidation of whistleblowers and associated protectors?
Well, I think, as is so often the case in South Africa, the difficulties, the challenges are not at the level of policy or legislation. It is the implementation thereof. And what is clear in the case of the attempted assassination of Advocate Naude is that she was provided with no protection at the time. She was hugely vulnerable and exposed, as it were. And that is a situation that cannot continue. As you've indicated, fearfully, this will have an intimidatory effect in respect of the very professionals that we need to be willing to take on these briefs if we are to secure the convictions and ultimate sentencing of those that need to face jail time if we are to win the war on organised syndicated crime.
Yeah.
And so whilst there are provisions which enable that type of protection. What is clear is that at the time the attempted assassination happened, she was entirely without such protection and safeguards.
Yeah. Nicole Fritz from Defend Our Democracy, thank you so much for your time. Pearl Mfusi, Director of the Legal Practice Council in KwaZulu-Natal, really appreciate your insights as well.